In the archives of the 31st century, the year 2024 is often referred to as the peak of the era of noise, a time when the human species reached its zenith of connectivity, yet plummeted into a profound collective isolation. For centuries, much of this period was lost to the great digital decay. Data rot consumed their clouds, their servers turned to rusted husks in the deserts of what used to be called Nevada. But today, we have achieved a breakthrough. Using deep-layer neural restoration, we have recovered a series of logs. These are not just files, they are echoes of a civilization that lived in a state of perpetual stimulation. They called themselves modern. We call them the ancestors of the pulse. To understand them, we must look at the artifacts they left behind, objects that to us seem like instruments of madness, but to them were as essential as breath itself. Welcome to the first recovered report of the Prompted Futures Archive. Today, we examine the year 2024. The most ubiquitous artifact found in every excavation site, from the ruins of London to the buried suburbs of Delaware, is a small rectangular slab of obsidian-like glass. Our initial theories suggested these were decorative amulets, or perhaps a form of currency, but the data restoration reveals a much more disturbing truth. This was the black glass oracle. The ancestors of 2024 did not just carry these devices, they served them. Biomechanical analysis of fossilized remains shows a distinct curvature in the cervical vertebrae, what ancient medical logs called text neck. This suggests that the human species spent up to 12 hours a day with their heads bowed in a gesture of permanent submission to the screen. But what were they looking at? They were consulting the oracle for every decision: where to eat, who to love, how to feel about the weather. They fed the oracle their locations, their biometric data, and their most intimate secrets. In return, the oracle provided the feed, a never-ending stream of light and sound designed to keep the brain in a state of dopamine-looping trance. They had the sum of all human knowledge in their pockets, yet the recovered logs show they primarily used it to watch 15-second loops of other humans performing repetitive movements, a strange digital liturgy that ensured no mind was ever truly alone, and no mind was ever truly at peace. Perhaps the most confusing discovery for our historians was the temples of iron. In every major city of the 2024 era, we find large warehouse-like structures filled with elaborate metal machinery. At first, we thought these were factories, but there was no output. No products were manufactured. Instead, thousands of people would gather here daily to move heavy weights in repetitive cycles. Our researchers have categorized this as the cult of the aesthetic. In a world where physical survival had become largely automated, the ancestors felt a primal guilt. They sought to reclaim their primal forms through ritualized suffering. They would push, pull, and lift until their muscle fibers tore, all while staring at themselves in giant wall-to-wall mirrors. But the ritual was incomplete without the oracle. Log entries from 2024 show that if a human performed a feat of strength in the Temple of Iron and did not capture it via the black glass oracle, the event was considered void or unseen. Validation was not internal. It was a digital commodity, traded in likes. They were sculpting bodies for a world they no longer lived in, preparing for a hunt that would never happen, for a war that was being fought entirely in the clouds of the internet. They were warriors with no battlefield, kings of a mirror world. As we dig deeper into the corrupted data packets, we find the hieroglyphs of the absurd, what the ancestors called memes. To a primitive eye, these look like simple images of animals or distorted human faces with cryptic captions. However, our linguistic AI suggests they were a form of sophisticated, low-latency telepathy. In a world of overwhelming tragedy and rapid change, the ancestors lost the ability to use complex language to describe their pain. Instead, they used these digital sigils. A picture of a burning room with a smiling dog was not a joke. It was a philosophical statement on the state of their world. This is fine, they would say, as their climate shifted and their societies fractured. Memes were the glue of their tribalism. They allowed a human in Delaware to feel an instant, unspoken connection with a human in Tokyo, bonded by a shared, ironic nihilism. They laughed to keep from screaming, coding their deepest fears into colorful pixels that would disappear as quickly as they appeared. They were a civilization that communicated in echoes, terrified that if the laughter stopped, the silence would become unbearable. One of the most tragic findings in our archaeological survey is the great scarcity of silence. We found millions of tiny white plastic buds designed to be inserted directly into the ear canal. These were the gatekeepers of sound. In 2024, silence was treated as a void that needed to be filled. Whether they were walking through a forest or sitting in a crowded train, the ancestors pumped constant streams of artificial noise into their brains. They listened to voices of people they would never meet, talking about crimes that didn't affect them, or music that repeated the same 4 chords to maintain a state of mild euphoria. They were terrified of the sound of their own thoughts. Recovered journals suggest that loneliness was their greatest epidemic, yet they spent their lives avoiding the one thing that could cure it: presence. They lived in a prompted reality, where every moment was curated by an algorithm that knew their fears better than they did. They were the masters of the earth, yet they lived like ghosts inside their own machines. As we conclude this report from the year 3077, we look back at the ancestors of 2024 with a mixture of pity and wonder. They were a species on the brink of greatness, standing at the door of the stars, yet they were held back by the very tools they created to set them free. The black glass oracle, the temples of iron, and the hieroglyphs of the absurd were all attempts to find meaning in a world that moved faster than their biological hearts could handle. They left us a planet scarred by their industry, but they also left us these fragments of beauty, their desperate digital cry to be remembered. We are the futures they could only imagine. We are the prompted results of their choices. And as we close these files, we must ask ourselves, if they could see us now, would they recognize the world they were building? Or would they simply bow their heads once more, looking for a signal that never comes? This is the end of the recovered log. Stay tuned for the next restoration. The past is watching.